Hello, everyone.
Hi, everybody.
My name's Everett Considine, and
I'm Dina Rose Burley.
Welcome to our webinar on the Enneagram from an IFS perspective.
Welcome.
Understanding the universe of personality and parts.
Yeah, that was really fun to come up with that subtitle.
Yeah, it does capture, I think, what we're talking about here.
Yeah, the whole universe of personality and parts. And it really is that, the universe of archetypes. Isn't it, Everett?
Yeah, and we're going to talk now a little who we are. And I'll let Dina introduce herself.
Well, thanks, Everett. I'm Dina Rose Burley. I'm a licensed mental health counselor. I've been in private practice since 2002. I work mostly with women who would like to be less stressed and more blessed in their life. I bring into that practice a profound appreciation of the body and the messages that we receive from the body. I'm actually the founder of a fitness practice called Body, spelled slightly different, as you can see there, BADI, and I have a wonderful community on Capitol Hill in Seattle, and teach in the mornings and many wonderful classes in a 13-year practice there as well. And so really going to bring in a lot of the appreciation of movement. And also I'm an Enneagram trainer and workshop leader. I have designed and developed many different Enneagram workshops over the years. My most favorite workshops were the ones that I did where we did panels of types. So we did 1 week for each type and had a wonderful opportunity to just ask lots of really great questions to a bunch of people who were similar in the type, the same type, and find themes and stuff that fell out of that over time. So it's a wonderful way to learn about types is to experience panels and people dialoguing with individuals of a certain type. Many of you may have experienced a type workshop, but also Enneagram in the movies was a great one that I designed and developed. The Enneagram in Brief was one that I developed with Susan Rhodes, who is a wonderful Enneagram author. Some of you may have taken her assessment. We directed you to her website if you wanted to see what type you are, if you wanted to take an introductory assessment. It's the EnneagramDimensions.org website. And I really like her assessment because it's a narrative assessment. So it's not a multiple choice assessment. So I think you get different kinds of information coming more clear when it's in a story format you can kind of relate to. And Enneagram in the movies was definitely one of my favorites. We explored type and subtype. And I use IFS as well, which is the perspective, systemic perspective that we're going to be viewing the Enneagram through. I actually am a systemic psychotherapist. I graduated from Bastyr University, so applied behavioral science was my degree. So I'm a systemic thinker in general. And one of the things that I never really liked about the Enneagram approaches that I had read in books was that they did not come from a systemic perspective. And we'll talk more about that later, but I'm really appreciating bringing these two systems together with my good friend Everett here, who I'd like to have introduce yourself.
I will, yeah. So my name's Everett Considine, and I've been doing IFS related stuff with Jay Early for a few years now. So some of you may be familiar with me from the classes I've taught. I taught his IFS peer facilitation classes for the last few years and have done various things and doing witnessed IFS sessions. And I live in Seattle also. Dina lives in Seattle. Yeah. And I've got a private practice, a thriving private practice where I work as a certified IFS practitioner and trainer. And prior to IFS, Dina actually, one of the reasons I wanted to actually do this workshop with Dina is she's the one that introduced me to IFS about 6 years ago, and the Enneagram. And so I thought, how great to kind of bring the circle all the way around and actually now do a training with her where we can now combine IFS and the Enneagram. And prior to my doing, IFS session work and training, I was a transformational coach and workshop leader, and did transformational workshops for gay men for several years. And that's actually where I discovered, my facility for doing transformational work with people. And prior to that, my orientation to self-development had been very much from a kind of an Eastern wisdom tradition point of view. Just studied the different pathways to enlightenment since a really young age, spent 15 years as a very hardcore meditation practitioner, and have always been just wanting to ride the wave of, personal growth, whatever that is. And for a lot of years for me, it was meditation, it was mindfulness. And then there was a certain point where I discovered that, I needed to be focusing on my emotional world. And so then that brought me into the world of doing my emotional work and understanding, how therapy then integrates into an overall approach to self-development that you need, that's in addition to your spiritual development. And when Dean and I met, has it been eight years now?
Yeah, it's been a while.
Yeah, we've known each other for a while. And I got introduced. Dean is really I would consider her my Enneagram teacher. And I went pretty deep with her for a couple years, just as a friend and being involved in her classes and workshops. And both of us are both, Enneagram people and IFS people. And we really have evolved a way that both of these modalities show up for us.
They live together for both of us.
Yeah.
We really live the Enneagram and IFS.
Mm-hmm.
And it's wonderful to have it alive in our friendship
for
all these years. Because the Enneagram is really the kind of thing that you want to talk about for a really long time.
Right.
Because it's so fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
And we always, our friendship is a lot about the big questions. Mm-hmm. and just being curious about life and people and getting to know ourselves. That is really the basis of a lot of our conversation.
Yeah, we still get together and have those deep conversations. And now we're going to have them with you.
Yay.
Listening.
To be at the diner with us.
Yes. And just to let you know a little bit about this call, our intention is for it to go around 90 minutes. And so we'll see if we make that or not. And we're going to do an overview of the IFS model of the psyche for some of you who may not be that familiar with IFS. And we're also going to do an overview of the Enneagram, in which we're going to actually touch on all of the 9 types. And we're going to kind of briefly discuss them from an IFS systemic perspective.
We're going to focus more on our personal stories about, people who we know, who are a particular type, who we know and love, because that really is the most fun thing, a way of learning, is just through these wonderful stories. And you'll start to see patterns, and the images that we use will be really helpful as well.
Yeah, so we're hoping to keep it a pretty engaging dialogue, so it'll be fun to listen to. And we'll actually have a Q&A also. There's going to be an area where you can text in your questions in a little chat window on the side. And what we have is a couple polls. And so what I'm going to do is actually load one of the polls now. And if you're able to, in the interface you're looking at, able to answer the poll, that would give us a little feeling for the level of experience that the people that are listening have with the Enneagram. And obviously, if you're not listening to this in real time, you won't be able to take the poll. So don't worry about it.
Wow, so far. Oh, it's just changing right before our eyes. This is very exciting. Wow, look at that, Ev.
That's great.
I assume everyone else can see what we're seeing.
I think so too. Yeah. We're seeing a few very experienced people, and then some people that have some experience, and then it's like 6% very experienced, 45% some experience, 33% the basics, 20% no experience. So that's great. Everyone's represented.
Nice little blend there. It should be really easy to speak to all those levels.
Yeah.
Just kidding. Some things you don't want to know. Okay. Fascinating.
So I'm going to talk about the IFS model of the psyche for a couple minutes. And one of the things that I love about the IFS model of the psyche is how simple it is. And in IFS, there's a concept that we call self, capital S, self. And in the IFS model of the psyche, we say that every person has self. Every person has their calm, clear center, their adult, has a place within themselves that is whole and complete when they're just fully immersed in that. And then when we're not in self, and a lot of us that are connected to spiritual traditions or mindfulness practices kind of know that sense of self as something maybe we experience when we're in prayer, or we're in meditation, or we're walking in nature, or we're staring into our loved one's eyes. That sense of or being in flow.
Or being just very intentional about connecting to it. The present moment.
Being very present. Yeah, very present. And, and then many times we're not in self. And we say when we're not in self, it's because parts are present. Parts of us are present, either protective parts or wounded parts. And in IFS, there's two flavors of protective parts. We say we have protectors that are proactive in their strategy, and protectors that are reactive. And our proactive protectors we call managers. And our managers are those parts of us that are trying to live our life so that our wounds don't get triggered.
They're working overtime.
They're working overtime. And for many of us, those are the dominant aspects of our sort of part of the personality that faces the world.
It's what you kind of would, on some level, like to relate to.
Mm-hmm.
It's more acceptable.
Yeah.
Work a day.
Yeah. The one of the examples I use a lot in my classes is someone might have a manager, might have a wounded part that makes them feel deficient, which all of us have that part somewhere. But the way that shows up for them, they may have a manager that makes them work really hard to be really successful so that they never have to feel deficient. So they buy that nice car, or they get that nice house, or they get that great degree. And that part of them that's driving them to do that is we call a manager. And that part of them is trying to live their life so that sense of deficiency doesn't get triggered. And so our managers, different types, we're going to talk about managers in relationship to the 9 types when we get into that in a few minutes. And then we have our protectors that come up when our wound has been triggered. When that sense of deficiency has been triggered. And those tend to be our addictions, our distractions, and we call those protectors firefighters. And so we have managers and we have firefighters, and we all whenever we have some protective aspect of the psyche that's operating, from an IFS perspective, it's either a manager or a firefighter. And there's a usefulness in understanding the distinction between the two.
Yeah, they have really good intentions.
Mm-hmm.
They're really trying to help.
Yes, all parts. That's a very important part of the IFS model of the psyche, is that all our protectors are trying to help, right? No matter how dysfunctional their strategies can be sometimes. Because
strategies come out of a context.
Mm-hmm.
And the context that they came out of, it made sense at that time.
Yeah, like when you were 2.
Yeah, like when you were 4.
And then our wounded parts, right? Our wounds in IFS, we call them exiles. So if you're new to IFS, this is a little IFS lingo here, right?
Really helpful.
And this is really the IFS model of the psyche, and you can really, you can really examine like anything that's going on in your life that you're trying to understand more, can kind of be looked at through this lens. The other thing that's very important about the IFS model of the psyche is to know, as you said, Dina, that all our parts are trying to help us. Everything, all our protectors are trying to help. And the other thing is that all these parts are actually in relationship with each other,
whether they know it or not.
Yeah, so we really have an inner system of parts in the psyche.
Every single person
has got a system of parts. And the other thing that's important to know about the IFS model of the psyche is that it's a non-pathologizing view of the psyche.
Mm-hmm.
We don't actually see that anyone is broken. We don't see that there is anything wrong. What we acknowledge is that we have wounds, and then we have protectors that have built up around those wounds.
And the idea is to get more choice. Through observing and getting to know these parts, you get more choice.
And if this is your first little taste of IFS, it is incredibly
it's a beautiful
powerful.
Model.
Incredibly powerful, and incredibly, you're able to really understand and work with yourself in this incredibly nuanced way that, I mean, we've never really discovered anything else that allows you to do the kind of depth work that you can with IFS.
Yeah, this is really the next wave of psychotherapy. Psychotherapy didn't really change much in 100 years. IFS model of the psyche really changing the whole landscape of how we work as clinicians. And it is very inspiring to see the transformations that happen by looking at the complexity of the psyche and working in this IFS way of unburdening and connecting to self and having a self-led life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just since you touched on unburdening, one of the last things I'll say about our exiles, right, is that we say that our wounded parts are carrying burdens. Our wounded parts are carrying burdens. And the work that we're doing in IFS is really threefold. A lot of times there's a kind of an analytical understanding that we can gain about the parts that are at play in some issue that we're dealing with. And then there's time we spend when we start to build relationships with our protectors in a very experiential sort of way. We build relationships with that, like the example I used, that guy could build a relationship with his workaholism part, and or his part, that his alcoholism part.
Right.
and through building those relationships, deepen more into a centered self and start to have choice around those patterns when they arise.
By bringing awareness.
Mm-hmm.
You notice the way it feels to be in your body when you're in self.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can notice the way it feels when you're really being led by a part, and then you can reconnect, through that noticing, you can reconnect the part and self. And that's often.
Mm-hmm. And then there's another layer of work, which is where we actually go in and unburden and heal our exiles.
Yeah.
And that's a very deep, profound aspect of the work, because once our exiles release those burdens, then all the protectors that have built up around those wounds are able to release and open and change their roles. And you can see extraordinarily deep transformation. When you're actually healing exiles, the whole system can change very quickly. And so I really feel this type of healing that we do in IFS is one of the most powerful ways to really transform things quickly.
Yeah, moving out of analysis and into a relationship with yourself and all the parts of yourself. It's just extremely rewarding work.
So we're big fans.
We love it. We love IFS.
And of course, all the, if you probably heard about this through Jay Early's list, and, all the wonderful books and products and things that he's created. And it's just, there's a whole world of resources for you around IFS here. So that's our little introduction to the IFS model of the psyche. And then Dina is going to talk a little bit about the Enneagram history here.
Well, Everett mentioned one of the things he loves about IFS is how simple it is. And one of the things I love about the Enneagram is how complex it is. It's so rich. It has such a rich history that many people have written about and spoken about. It actually was an oral tradition. So 2,500-year history. I've heard it said that it was originally received wisdom from the Sufi order, and it became an oral tradition. But you can also see some Greek and Roman roots. But originally what I heard was that this is a wonderful, rich oral tradition, and it was often in relationship with a master that the devotee would get information about type as needed, because it's very, very powerful information to understand motivation, human motivation, not behavior. We're not talking about behavior with the Enneagram. We're talking about what that energy of motivation that sparks behavior, and understanding what primarily drives people's behavior is actually a very powerful thing to know. So the information was often given out in small doses as needed, and then it passed down over the years, and people started to write down about the Enneagram, mostly as a exploration of 9 types, or 9 motivations, or 9 types of people. Ennea is 9 actually, and Enneagram is 9 descriptions, 9 different flavors of our psyche, a general orientation or character. Character, from my perspective, is, and I will just let you know that this is, where I come from in terms of my orientation, is that character is something that you're born with. So you're born with a certain orientation, which is your Enneagram type and connecting points. We call them Ennea parts. It's not something that comes out of a wound. It's something that is just inherent. And it comes with gifts, and it comes with burdens. It comes with a path of development, and it comes with obvious signs of red flag behavior and trouble. And that's another thing that I love about the Enneagram, is that you can really see character it's impersonal, or this system exists and we kind of live inside of it. So you're able to see archetypes and patterns that relate to character, that sort of transcend your own individual experiences in your family of origin or in your culture of origin. Gurdjieff really talked about the Enneagram as a model of natural process. So it was a process Enneagram. So it was a description of ego development over time. And that was really, and he was one of the original people that wrote about the Enneagram. He didn't necessarily talk about the Enneagram as a typography, which is describing personality types. So somebody went ahead and translated this process into types. I think it's useful to look at it in both ways, both as a model of natural processes and a complex system of human development that describes 9 different personality types.
And how did you, so what pulled you into the, how did you get involved?
Well, that's a great question. When I graduated from the Leadership Institute of Seattle, which was accredited through Bastyr University, it was about a systemic psychotherapy. So it was looking at all the things that affect health, all the systems that affect health, with an emphasis on family of origin. And I felt like I got a really good experience with studying these various external systems and how they affect health. But I found myself wanting to, do session work with people. And I wasn't really clear about how to even begin thinking about what happens in between people's ears. Like what happens in the psyche? What is the universe of personality and parts that is walking in for me to interact with and get to know? I felt kind of at a loss for the inner system.
The inside.
The inside.
Right.
I got the outside. And so a friend of mine, Debbie, she actually knew about the Enneagram, and she threw me a book. It was the Riso and Hudson book. It's that wonderful book that we call the Bible, which is the wisdom of the Enneagram, by Don Richard Riso and Russ Hudson. And it's really a great book to start out. And I just tore it apart. I wrote in the margins and I just fell in love. And just like a good 7, which you'll find out what a type 7 is, but that's my type. I decided that since I wanted to learn the Enneagram, that I should facilitate a workshop about the Enneagram. And I figured, well, what I didn't know, I can just elicit in conversation from people in the room who were a particular type. And what I was good at is having lots and lots of friends and being intuitive about what type they were. So I just typed my community and just asked them to come over. We had a party, and each week it focused on the type. And over 5 years of these panel groups, there were 11-week Enneagram classes, and we took small breaks in between, but I did them basically the whole year for 5 years. So I learned about type experientially on the couch in my living room around a beautiful fire and just talking with people. And everybody got to just ask questions, like very open style to the people that were on the couch of a particular type. So it wasn't just the facilitator getting to ask questions. It was everybody in the room with their wild questions, and they were hysterical and pointed and touching. And they did a better job interviewing than I could do, just from my frame of reference. And over time, these just really strong flavors of these different personality types, it was impossible to miss. It was impossible to miss type, when you got to see it in mass, like a group of 5 or 8 of a particular Enneagram type is like very, very clear, the energy of that type. And then as I did that, went deeper and deeper, read a bunch of other books, and started to actually co-facilitate workshops. And I co-facilitate several workshops with Susan Rhodes, who is from Seattle as well, on the systemic Enneagram. And now she's on her 3rd book.
Oh, yeah.
And I knew her before she wrote any books on the Enneagram, and she's already written 3 since we met. And a lot of at least the first book, which is called The Positive Enneagram, and she's a 4, so that does not come inherently inherent to her point of view, was because she was having conversations with the 7 about the Enneagram, and I just was, looking at all the types as blessings. I just thought, wow, they're all amazing, and focusing really on the gift. So she used that perspective and kind of wrote this wonderful book. And the 2nd was on the archetypes of the Enneagram. And the latest one is on Ken Wilber and the Enneagram.
Oh, that's going to be interesting.
So it's the integral.
Enneagram. Right.
Anyway, so that's how I came about the Enneagram. I can't imagine my life without the wisdom of the Enneagram, honestly. It helps me so much in my life and in my practice. People think I'm a mind reader, and I'm like, no, I just know the Enneagram.
Yeah, and it has really blown up the last few years, right? I mean, more and more and more interest in it.
People are really open to the wisdom of the Enneagram now.
And there's something that's so, the IFS model of the psyche is so generic,
right?
And it's so not really, we look at patterns, relationships between parts, but we don't look at overall patterns. Now Jay's pattern system is also another model, which is great for looking at patterns between parts. And of course, that is very oriented towards parts. And
it's all about the patterns.
It's all about, that the thing that made sense to me was like, once you learn there are parts, then you start to see there are archetypal patterns. There are different kinds of patterns that patterns of parts that come up.
That's right. Yeah, because sometimes I would be working with people and it wasn't clear, like the distress that they were experiencing. It wasn't like a real obvious tie back to their family of origin or experiences from their life, and yet they were still suffering in this predictable way. And some of those sufferings are type, what we call type burdens or character burdens. And there's also blessings, but that's generally not what people come to therapy for.
Right, right.
They need help with a specific burden. And being able to view it objectively, like, oh, this is just something that sixes have to deal with, and it's not actually going to go away. It's just about learning to work with and be easy in your harness, as Tom Condon says.
Right.
How to be easy in your harness, the harness of character.
Well, and it also opens up, I think for anyone, it just opens up great self-reflective questions, you know. Like I love to introduce someone to the Enneagram and tell, you know, and I may have some theory about what their part is, I mean, what their type is, but to just let them go start that inquiry.
Yeah.
You know, you do that test and suddenly you're looking inside. Suddenly you're looking for patterns. Suddenly you're, you know, you're on a journey.
That's right. It's that deep inquiry, because like people, the hot thing is being authentic, you know, but it's like authentic to what, you know, because a lot of times it's a big jumble inside and we're not really sure what influences are authentic to us. So like when I first took an Enneagram assessment, I was tied to as a 2 and a 7 because my mom's a 2 and I had just interjected so much of her point of view that I thought it was me.
Right.
And it wasn't until I started to, like a good bra, lift and separate, what's the difference, you know, that I could see where my actual motivation and energy was versus hers. And then I could begin to decide what I wanted to emphasize and release.
Well, and I know when I met you guys, I had already typed myself as a 9, and it actually like really got a lot out of that, right? Because I looked at my repressed anger, I got a lot out of that. But then knowing you, where you had a more nuanced view, like you were able to show me that I was a 6, a counterphobic 6, and then when I really landed there.
It's a relief.
Oh my, yeah, that like explains so much. Like I could see so much of myself in that. But even that process of thinking I was a 9 for a while was so useful, you know, because what are you doing? You're looking inside, you're asking questions, you're wanting to change things.
Yeah. And the thing about this whole time I was studying the Enneagram, I was a little bit distressed because it didn't really resonate to me that like I am a 7, fill in the blank, full stop. Like that just really wasn't resonating for me. So that's, you know, where we tried to really bring together, how do you bring together a systemic point of view and look at type? And so we'll continue to talk about that, but that's the good thing is you can kind of have it all. You can actually use both together. But since we'll just stay in this point of view for a little while, we'll talk about you are a fill in the blank type. But please know as just a side note, and we'll begin to integrate this more and more, that's only the beginning of the story. But because there's just so much incredible complexity within the system. And
you know what else I think is power? I'm just this kind of realization I'm having right now is one of the reasons I think that you get hooked into the Enneagram and then you can just keep going, is that there really is a surface layer that's quite simple. It's quite simple. And then as you start to drill down, it gets more rich and complex.
It's almost like one of those fractal images that are screensavers, and they just keep getting more and more beautiful and complex the more you look at them. That's the Enneagram. And I was always taken by this image of this circle with this triangle and this hexad. I always just found it to be so gorgeous. Like sometimes I would just meditate on that symbol and I would get lots of wonderful stuff. It really does show you this, there's sacred geometry at play here. So that's a wonderful thing, just to recognize that before there were words, there was this wonderful symbol.
Yeah, and so we're just going to quickly touch on the 9 types. Then we're actually going to go through each type in a little more detail. But
so there are just 3 different titles for that particular number, or archetypes that are associated with that particular type. And when we talk about the Enneagram as a system, we would start at 9 and then work clockwise around. So let's go ahead and do that. We see type 9 at the top of the Enneagram, referred to as the peacemaker, the mediator, and the diplomat, as key kind of archetypal images. And you can already get to have a feeling of that. It's at the top of the Enneagram. So it's literally in the universe. It's in the field of all possibilities. It's a lot of open space and a lot of positivity up at the top of the Enneagram. So I just want you to also continue to think about the symbol as we move along to look at type 1.
Yeah, I'll do that one. So then we have the perfectionist, the reformer, the judge, and I think a lot of times people associate one image with a type, and I think the perfectionist is the one that people think of a lot as the one. And, and that also, this is something you could touch on as we go through this too, is like you said, there's a process here that's starting.
At 1, right? Something's born. Something has been created out of the void of 9. Something now exists. So it makes sense that it would want to really be exact and clear about what it was, and that very first thing had to set kind of a standard for the performance of whatever this thing was that was being created. So that first mark is a very precise one and a very serious one. In order for something to be born, it has to go through a lot of processes and a lot of intensity. We get that at 1.
And then type 2 is when move to?
Yeah, we move to like something's being nurtured at 2. So it was born and now it's got to survive. And in order to survive, it needs to nurture. So we see a lot of nurturing qualities at 2. The helper, the giver, and the caretaker, the primary archetypes, the sacred mom. Yeah, and often is usually seen as a yin or a female aspect archetypally, but we see lots of 2 males as well, but less shown in the mass media and in public.
And then 3, we go to the achiever, the motivator, the performer.
So now that something's been nurtured, it wants to be kind of tested out in a certain way. So let's test the performance. So these are the high energy individuals.
Yeah, and these are like many of us want to be 3s. We want to achieve. Yeah, exactly. USA, a type 3 country. So that's achievement. That person that just goes. And then we moved to something a little different than achievement. We moved now to 4.
Yeah, we've tried our thing out in a lot of different environments to see how it'll run and how it'll deal with speed. But now we want to go into a different kind of depth to see if we can develop into our sensitivities, into our heart. And we have here archetypally the romantic, the artist, and the symbol maker. I mentioned Susan Rhodes, and then her incredible detail orientation. She's a 4 on the Enneagram. So this is somebody who, they're getting started on developing something. So now they're going to go out and they're going to study a whole bunch of different things at a lot of different levels, mostly on the emotional realm, to see how this thing will develop in the heart. And then you see us at the bottom of the Enneagram. We're at the top and now we're all the way down at the bottom. They call the bottom the void. So this is really the depth at 4. It's the emotional depth. And then when we move to 5, then it's the mental depth.
Yeah, or the observer, the thinker, the watcher. I always think of Trekkies.
Totally.
People that are very analytical.
Yeah, this
very
is the expert. This is the professor. And so, they're doing a different kind of observation and testing. They like to see things in the natural environment. So they don't want to mess around too much with it, and just see how well it operates in the world. And again, there's still a lot of testing going on around the side of the bottom of the Enneagram to see, can this thing really survive all these challenges? And as it moves to point 6, we're really looking at, as something gets developed, all the things that can go wrong, and all the things that can create trouble, and all those little nuances on the edges that are safety issues. So And Everett is a 6, so
I'm a 6, so I know this point well. The loyalist, the questioner, the defender. You know, I always think of kind of the archetypal mother as a type 2, just that selfless mother. And then that archetypal protective father is a papa, is being type 6.
Yeah.
You know, that strong energy that makes you feel safe and protected. And that is looking out for danger. Watching out for danger.
Yeah, somebody's got to look at that stuff.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Unsung heroes often, because they're looking at hard things and they're reporting about them.
Yeah, firefighters.
But once they've looked at all the things that can go wrong, then they're getting really ready. And they call the 6 the dweller on the threshold. So they're really like, this is the final go through before you're going to really go live.
Mm-hmm.
And at 7, it passes through the channel and shoots out into the world as a very excited expression of possibility. And you see the enthusiast, the adventurer, and the generalist. This is a big splashy entry. And this is the improviser, is also a great title for 7.
Mm-hmm.
So this is somebody who's performing slightly different than a 3, right? So they're dancers, or they're, lots of different types, but we'll as we go into that. But as they move into 8, they're taking all that wonderful up energy of the 7, and they're going to go ahead now, and it worked. It went live. So let's go ahead now and ground it now that it works, and ground it as 8, which is all about kind of being embodied, life on earth coming into the body. This is the leader, the challenger, the asserter. Some people like to talk about the boss. And that's a very clear male or yang archetype. So that's going to be something that's fun to look at, like female 8s and male 2s, and how those things, how it changes the type because of the gender stuff. And then we go back into, now that we've had a full cycle, we go back into 9, which is once again the field of all possibilities, and something new can be born. So we can look at that as ego development over time.
And then you can see, if you actually look at the lines that go between the parts, like if you see 7 goes to 1, and 7 goes to 5, and 5 goes to 8, and 5 goes to 7. And these are and again, so we've got the high level, which is pretty simple to understand. 9 types. We say everyone fits within a type. And now we could go to another level of complexity, and we can start looking at relationships now between the types, the connecting points. And this is where I think the perspective we're presenting in here of how to actually start to look how the different types live within us as parts. And if you're someone that does IFS, and so you're very, your parts, right? You might start to notice that some of your parts are actually of these different archetypes.
Right.
And both Dina and I do IFS work with people as a practitioner and a therapist. And I know that in my work that I'm not looking. I tend to be just very much present during sessions. So I'm never looking for a type. But the way this shows up for me is I'll notice it when that type shows up. Because it'll just be unmistakable.
Exactly.
It's like, oh, there's a type 2 part.
Yeah.
Like, oh, there's a type 4 part.
When you study it, experientially, and you look at images, a lot of looking at images and looking at the flavor that comes off of each type, it's very visceral. So it's kind of like not being able to tell the difference between red and blue at some point. It becomes very, very apparent. The energy of the type. So I'd like you to think about them as energy types.
Yeah, and actually I wanted to touch on that, because one of the Enneagrams become so popular, and there really are kind of different schools. There's different teachers, and and anyone really can learn it and go teach it. It's not, no one controls it. And I have noticed that it feels like kind of different groups or schools, like everyone has a little something different that they're focused on when they're typing.
And yeah, and different assumptions.
And different assumptions. Like I know with you, it's very much about an energy because of seeing that energy together. So it's almost like you'll see an energy and be able to recognize it.
It's like the whole package.
And and then other people have, like you said, it's so one of the things I found is not everyone types people the same.
Right.
You know, or even types themselves the same. And I don't really see a problem in that.
Definitely not.
Because it's, again, everyone's just exploring themselves to a deeper level.
That's right. That's right. It's
if no one feels like they have, if no one feels like they have to be right.
No, but I totally love studying it because, like when I first started, like I thought I understood like maybe 3 types, and all the rest just seemed very vague to me. So it was super fun to like feel like out of the vagueness coming this clarity. And understanding over time, because there's no way that your mind can take it in all at once. So just stay curious, even if you think you know it. Like I'll definitely get dissed all the time when I think I know, but really I'm looking at a culture of origin thing, a New York Italian thing, and I'm confusing that with or family of origin something going on.
Well, and even to tie it back to IFS. If you're in self,
that's right.
You're most likely going to be in a place of curiosity, and if you're not curious, and then you're in a place of I know, you're in a part most likely.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So self could, from our perspective, from other authors' perspective, self is type, but for our perspective, self transcends type. You could witness your parts. You can witness your type parts. And then you can get into a relationship with them, and then you can invite them to share their blessings with you, and you can listen and observe and guide them into like the best possible solutions and options for your life.
Yeah, and that even ties in. There's something else you'll hear when people talk about type. They'll talk about healthy and unhealthy, right? Like an unhealthy one versus a healthy one. And usually what the difference is someone that's done their own work, someone that's doing their emotional and spiritual work will evolve to the point of being the healthy version of that type. And that's another way I think IFS, since IFS is such an incredible tool for doing your work, for doing your emotional spiritual work, it really integrates well.
Yeah, I talk about like paying attention to detail inside and how that's so loving to do. And people that pay attention to themselves and love all these different aspects of who they are just way more delightful to be around. And they do wonderful things in the world for sure, because they know themselves that well. They know what's pushing their buttons, and they have a choice.
Yeah, and I think a lot of what I see that we're doing in IFS ultimately is learning to love all parts of ourselves.
Every little part.
Every little part, which shows you're in self. That is that place. And so to notice your 1 or notice your 8 and to be able to love that, and I guess that again, that view of the witness, self being the open-hearted awareness, right? The love, the caring witness, right? Not necessarily the detached witness. That, as we do our work, as we do our work with IFS or whatever, tool we're using, and we deepen in that ability to be more and more in that caring witness, for what's arising in us, what's arising in the world around, compassion.
Yep. And oftentimes, the first time people look at type, is there's a repulsion to their type. Shame comes up. I just see this all the time. It's just so funny. It just seems to take a minute for people to begin to want to embrace themselves. And this model brings so much appreciation that it's infectious.
So let's do another poll.
More polls.
So this one is going to be,
do you know your type?
Do you know your type? and get a sense
Let's see
of
who you are.
Yes, get a
Start
sense
poll,
of
you have to press. There we go. Who are you?
So we put another poll up there, and if you know your type or have a sense of it, go ahead and mark it.
Oh, that's so fun. We have no 2s so far.
You were talking about that earlier.
My husband's not on the call. He's a 2. Oh my gosh. Well, looks like we have a lot of 9s. Or maybe you just think you're a 9. Oh, it's still moving. Oh, we got 2s. We got a bunch of 2s now. How did that happen? Wow. This seems impossible that we would have like this incredible even split of 2s, 5s, and 9s. Wow, I wonder what it was about our marketing that made it us. We have a clear split here between 2s, 5s, and 9s.
Nice.
Oh, okay. And then we've kind of got a smack roll of everything, don't we? Got a little.
Yeah, so 5% 1, 16% 2.
Oh, look, the 4s and 5s like us.
5% 3, 16% 4, 16% 5, 11% 6, 5% 7, 5% 8, 16% 9, 5% not sure.
Wow.
So welcome, everyone.
Welcome, welcome. Maybe by the end there'll be no one who's not sure now.
Yeah. Oh, that's a 6.
I'm not sure I buy any of this shit.
We're going to go on, and we're actually now going to go in and talk about each type for a few minutes.
Yeah, we won't take too long with each one, because that's what the workshop is for.
Yeah, and just a little preview. What we're going to do in the workshop that's coming up is actually spend the whole session focusing on each type. So right now, we're just going to spend a few minutes on each type, and
you can spend a whole week on each type or more.
Yeah.
But here's that top of the Enneagram, number 9. I love these images. Oh, love that one of the Dalai Lama. And the images, what is that? Speak louder than words. So it's really fun to just let your eyes rest over the 3 images that we provided. And then the quotes are supposed to be funny, so please don't be offended. All the 9s logged off. No, and then we have 9 now. We went into 9 archetypes, and so we started out with 3: a mediator, diplomat,
and those are from
peacemaker.
Susan Rhodes' work, right?
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right. She's we were looking at type and subtype and type arenas. And so we got a lot more complexity here, which is nice. So you can just let your eye roll over some of these descriptions and can kind of feel the quality of the type, and look, at the images, and then look at the descriptions and see if you can get a sense of it. My sister's a 9. So she, comes across as one of the most peaceful people that you'll ever meet. Actually, when you talk to her, she says she's quite anxious. That might be her connection to 6. But the main goal here is harmony, creating harmony in the world. It's the wholeness, right? So the 9 is the field of all possibilities. So it's the circle. It's all of it. So they're really looking for the way things work together, and they can really clearly see that sometimes there are invisible connections, and they're trying to make that connection between people in a mediation capacity, and between people in an energetic way, where they just bring, like my sister will say, I really don't want to fight about this right now. And she just is like, oh yeah, we actually don't need conflict right at this moment. And then it's a lovely energy to bring, and really important, obviously, when we deal with so much diversity in the world, to have these wonderful peacemakers available to smooth things out.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you'll see at the bottom, we just put a couple managers, firefighters, just, you know, a little perspective on the kind of parts, right? Again, from an IFS perspective, that a 9 type might deal with. And there's a lot of like repression of anger is very big at type 9, right? And again, wanting harmony, right? Harmony at all costs, perhaps.
And you know, it's repression of the anger, because if you know a 9 for long enough, you'll see them hit the override button about 1,000 times, and then the 1,001th time they explode.
They explode.
I've seen my sister throw a chair across the room. You know, it's just like, oh my God, it's terrifying. They 9s are indomitable when they get they harness the raw power that's within them. It's so strong. They're just incredible type. When we see 9s hit their stride and move into their center and move out of their center and break through into action, they are the most powerful leaders that we have. And they lead by being connected. And then you see that in the Dalai Lama. It's just an incredible example.
A great example of a healthy 9.
I think we can move on to the next. Yeah, it's plenty of time. Oh, very different slide, very different images here. For type 1, something has been born. So I like that, the Joan of Arc image in the middle and her long pole. You often see ones literally pointing up. There's often a point up, looking to the ideal. They're the standard setters of the Enneagram. So you can really see that when you look into their faces. And really what this is about is creating beauty in the world. This is a major orientation. It's not just to have things excellent for excellence sake. It's because it's beautiful when it does perform at that potential that it has. It's gorgeous, and they love that, and they can even become addicted to that.
And they're so shiny.
Yeah.
Ones are always just have a certain look around them, a certain care, you know, an attention to detail.
That's a wonderful
attention to
way
detail.
of putting it. Yeah, when we had our panels of 1s, and all of our had like 8 or 9 1s that were all on the little red couch there, and they would all sit up very straight, and the eyes would dart back and forth, and there was a seriousness just at the outset of the conversation, but like within 10 or 15 minutes, it was like the funniest group. Because I think 1s, when they get that lighthearted thing, they're some of the funniest people, because it's very ironic, like that they can poke fun of themselves and how perfectionistic they get. It's really delightful. And it really helps people to feel a lot more comfortable with the 1, is when they soften up and they're able to look at these qualities of themselves and bring a good humor about it, because they do things better than most people. It's just, that's the truth. It's always going to be the truth. So that could be very intimidating, I think.
Well, and I think they also they trigger our inner critics,
right?
You know, because their standard is so high, and they're, you know, and they're trying to reach it, you know, and they can't ever reach it. Usually, that's the way they feel. And I know working with them, just doing parts work with them, you know, the inner critics are so strong.
Yeah.
They're so inner critic driven. And
yeah, it's, you know, it's like some types, you know, they get, when a part moves forward and starts to run the system, this is, even just the experience of a part moving forward is unique to the person and to the part. But for 1s, like this part, when that judge comes forward, it's kind of like a hot poker up the ass. It's fast and it's sharp and it's very intense. So it can be hard to, in the moment, become aware that you're being taken over by the motivation to get it just right. And there can be a tendency to forget that wholeness or perfection is actually including everything and leaving out nothing. So it's including the flaw. And when you get to see that, then it all kind of gets pretty absurd.
Well, and there's this beautiful place you can get in IFS with your critics, where once you've like done the healing around them, they actually get converted into like inner mentors.
Yeah.
because they really are the parts of you that hold the highest vision for who you can be.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember in my own work, it was about 2 years after I'd been doing parts work,
Mm-hmm.
and that I realized that I didn't have harsh inner critics anymore. They were encouraging.
Yeah.
They're like, you know what, you could do that better.
Yep.
But it wasn't like, oh, you fucking asshole, what's
Right.
wrong? It's like all the harshness was gone.
And I think Jay Early does a beautiful job at like differentiating different critics.
Yeah. Jay and Bonnie's inner critic. If you haven't done your own inner critic work, which everyone needs to do,
Mm-hmm.
and it's kind of one of the first things we kind of stumble into when we're doing parts work, because it's like low-hanging fruit. And Jay and Bonnie's book on the inner critics is like a must-read.
Yeah, it's
Really,
fascinating
really
to see all
work.
the detail that there are different kinds of critics.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, you can refine the way types show up in the world. Maybe not the way you experience them, but maybe that too.
Mm-hmm.
But definitely the way that they show up and that they get filtered through self. So we'll keep talking about that.
Yeah.
But
and then the firefighters, something that stood out for me, I think just because of my own conflict avoidant nature, like I noticed people that have a lot of angers, I noticed that there was a certain point when I realized a lot of that perfectionism was kind of fueled by anger.
Yeah.
Like that's like the raw energy, actually.
It's kind of fire,
like you said, you were talking about that earlier, just kind of a fire elemental energy that's running them.
Right.
And where there's anger, there's wounds.
Yeah.
Right. So there's another layer under that, of healing work, that could be done to allow someone to, I think sometimes people are afraid that if they heal like something that's making them successful in the world,
yep,
that suddenly they're going to become
There's
blobs
no
and have no motivation.
Right.
And this actually is something that will show. It's like, well, no, once you heal your inner critic and you're no longer being pushed by your anger, that love for the beauty of doing things well is not going to go away.
No.
That's still going to be there.
You just don't look crazy after you've completed making your cake. The cake is gorgeous and you're chilled out. It's not, you don't look like a ragamuffin or feel like one at the end of your process.
I had a real image of that when you said that.
Here's our two.
Speaking of making cakes.
Oh, I love that picture of Diana Ross. She's so awesome. This is one of those ones where the images might be confusing, but I love that because they're so different. But Mother Knows Best. There's a male too, John Ritter, and he's actually holding up the number 2. So
we like that. Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like people have a real sense of this archetype of mom, the helping. So just have a look at some of those wonderful natural nurturer, eager lover, friendly hostess. And 2 has such a wide range of presentations archetypally. It's really fascinating to study the pantheon of archetypes that are underneath each type. And you can see so many different faces of that particular, and they're all living inside of a 2, all these different aspects. And it's just wonderful to kind of get to know them and to normalize the experience at 2, that it's not all just about wanting to help.
Right.
It's not all about just wanting to help.
Right.
There's a lot more than that.
Well, and also that I think many of us that are in the helping profession have got caretaking and pleasing parts. So many of us do have a 2 inside of us that's one, again, that's one of the managers that's pretty low-hanging fruit in IFS. If you've got a strong pleaser or caretaker, usually that's one of the things you work with pretty quickly once you start doing your parts work.
Yeah.
And if you're not a 2, it's kind of easy to unblend from that part, right? And stop caretaking. But if you are a 2, it becomes much more challenging because it's reflexive. Like your whole system is oriented towards that.
It's oriented toward creating the image of being helpful. And this is really a key piece here with understanding twos. They're kind of like out there as a sign, like help is available, and you can seek me out if you need anything. So they're busy creating that image in the world so that people can get help when they need. So it's like the Florence Nightingale image. And you might go up to Florence Nightingale and she might, you know, not actually be the one that helped you, but she will send you to the person that needs to help you.
Right.
So they really do create that strong archetype. My mom and my husband are both twos, so I think they're very different twos. But I know this type intimately well, and this orientation toward what's going on with the other person, and the kind of fun stuff, drama that can happen when you're focused on other people's issues over your own.
Right? Because you're going to always feel unseen, unappreciated.
Inevitably, because you do your job so well.
Yeah. The best employee I ever had was a 2. And I didn't know what a good employee was till I had him. Like, I never had anyone that was that focused on doing their job well. It was kind of eye-opening, actually. Sort of changed my hiring practices to see what a big difference it could be to have someone in there who was so genuinely there to help and get things done. And
I think we can.
So, and again, firefighters, comfort seeking, sex addiction. There's the Spider Woman is one of the archetypes of the 2, or the Spider Man. You know. The diva, someone that allures someone into their web, right? You know, some of the more shadowy, it's a little shadowy aspects of 2. Seductive lover.
Some of the greatest storylines in movies is the storyline of between a 2 and an 8. So we'll get that. So I think we'll move on, to 3. See how we're doing at 3. Oh boy, very different.
Different energy, right? Looking at those images.
Yeah, work is more fun than fun. These are the high energy individuals in the world, in our practice. It's hard to keep them. They have to pencil in self-care. This is something that they don't schedule. They have to schedule into their life, because that's probably the last thing they're going to think about. They're going to make sure they get the deadline, and they succeed at the goal that they've set for themselves.
You know, what's interesting is I have a type 3 client who really the key to his success was he learned early on. He came out of a lot of trauma. He learned how powerful, how good therapy was for him. And so literally since his early 20s, he's always had a therapist, and he's enormously successful now. And so I think once they get it, like he could see the advantage of that, right? Then they're in, right? If it can help them. And I know as a 6, you told me this once, and it was so true. 6s all want to be 3s.
Yeah.
And we don't have the energy. We don't have, the only time, so this is a little bit of around like those connecting points, right? Because a 6 goes to 3 in disintegration, which means when there's a crisis, I get focused and productive. I am focused and productive.
You got to put a bacon on the table.
Yep. And but if there's no crisis, I really don't have the energy to do that.
Yeah.
And I think one of the actually letting go of my need to be a 3 was something enneagrammatic that's happened in the last 2 years for me, where I actually have let go of this need for this abstract idea of success, you know, and really have just settled in, and because of that, I'm becoming very successful. But letting go of the need for that drive.
Our culture really puts this in our face from such a really young age, the motivation of success and achievement. And we do in the US of A. And when I was just in Bali for 3 weeks, and it was wonderful to see just a totally different cultural orientation toward work, and what their whole life is an offering to spirit. That's actually how they spend their time. 65% of a woman's time is setting up, conducting, or breaking down from an offering or a ritual. So it's just an extremely different orientation.
Wow.
So to come back home and to feel like just the level of doing,
Right.
And it's profound difference. But it created our country. And
we're
all the amazing things that we have here.
Yep. And of course, the threes are who we see.
Yeah.
Right. Those are the
spokesmodel.
The spokesmodel. Those are the people that are highly successful. And, managers, achievers. It's like that example, the doers, the strivers. One of the things, this 1-3 client of mine, his 3-part, when that's active, it's a robot. It has this is the thing I've noticed about 3s. They have like an inexhaustible supply of energy to do.
It's pretty awesome.
It's awe-inspiring, actually.
Yeah, it speaks to our potential. More than any other type, this type can just show the potential of the human being to transcend different limits, whether they be physical or mental. I mean, it's pretty profound to see. For example, Michael Jordan, incredible talent, but also the discipline.
The discipline, right?
Yeah.
And again, this 3 client, the thing when his 3-part is really activated, there's no family, there's no, there's nothing else except the goal that part has. So that's the shadow side of that, right? Is no heart. For him, the way that shows up for him.
And it can be kind of an addiction to the building. So then we get to the thing being built. It's kind of like, meh. It's really hard to celebrate.
It's funny because he builds hotels.
Literally.
He just builds one and then he's on to the next one,
But I think probably most of us have a 3-part, even if we aren't a 3, because we live here.
Right.
So it's fun to reckon with that.
Yep.
And think about that.
Yeah. Achievement for achievement's sake.
From our culture of origin. And some people might not be from the U.S. that are on the call, though. I took that for granted. Let's look at our 4s. I love this slide.
Type 4.
Of course, since 4s are so individual, it's hard to show. You'd need a lot more slides to show all the diversity of presentations. But no matter what 4 you're talking about, there's a lot of, it's very refined point. So there's a lot of intentionality in what's being expressed. As you can see by those 3 images there. There can be a disdain of ordinariness, or of not taking a lot of care towards something. So you can see that wonderful quote there, and really feel a sense of the depth here. Again, remembering that we're now at the bottom of the Enneagram. So this is what we call in the void. This is where the 4s live. They live in the emotional depth. And so therefore they're beautiful symbol makers and artists. They have a profound artistic achievement because they have a tremendous amount of passion for expressing their individuality and uniqueness in the world. And each of the types you could say and I put up another poll also if you want to answer it just on your, how familiar you are with IFS. But you could say each of the parts kind of might tend to be more manager driven, more firefighter driven, or more exile driven. And, and 4s are very in touch with their exiles. They're very in touch with their woundedness. And whereas other parts. And thank God, because they really rep it. They represent these parts of us that are unknown and unseen.
Yes.
And thank God.
Yeah. And that's why it's so powerful, the art they create.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
They're able to bring that into our art so we can all touch into that.
Right. We all have such profound denial. It's not hard for us to deny our neediness or our vulnerability, but the fours thankfully won't have that. They won't have any of that. They're going to make sure that that point of view gets out there. And I really appreciate that, because that's not like a valued point of view in our culture.
We were talking about the new Adele song, Hello.
Oh,
like
yeah.
if you haven't listened to that and cried your eyes out yet, you should.
Watch the video.
And watch the video. But it's such a great example of a type 4 artist, Adele, creating some art that is so able to touch into such a deep place within the psyche that is normally exiled. And I know I had a profound feeling. It just took me into this level of grief and pain, but there was this healing that came out of it for me.
The only way out is through.
Yeah.
You know.
It took me back to a relationship.
Yeah.
And it took me back to regret, but I'm such a different man now that who I am now, looking at that, I'm able to just have a completely different experience of it. And I would not necessarily have gone back and touched on that if I hadn't listened to that song.
I'm so grateful for my fours. You got to feel it to heal it. That's really a real thing. For sure.
One of the complexities fours deal with, and if you're a therapist, or a healer of some type, is many times they actually evolve identities around their woundedness. And so where another type, we can take them into an unburdening session and they can release something and they can really release it. For a 4, it can be challenging because it's not easy for them to release because it's been built into their identity. And so this is a key, and I've done coaching with 4s around this, so that they're able to realize that, when we unburden something, they're really going to have to really look and see if there's a part that doesn't want to release it for some reason.
Yeah, secondary gain.
Yeah. And that's an enneagrammatic insight that has been so useful in my healing practice. Right? Is to help a 4 take that next step. Right?
I'm so grateful. I've had such wonderful 4 teachers and friends in my life who, without them, I probably would not have gone to the depths that I've gone to, because they made sure that I saw the value in the emotional depth and pain. Everybody wants transformation, but nobody wants to feel pain. So most people don't realize that transformation is when pain and love come together. That's what transformation is. So without actually touching that pain, there's no growth. We're moving on to 5. Okay, 5. Very, very different, because again, we're in the void, we're in the depth, but this is more on the mental realm than the emotional realm. So you can just take a minute to observe the observers.
That's Annie Leibovitz.
Yeah, Annie Leibovitz. With the glasses and the camera.
Right? It's such a great 5 photo.
It was so interesting to watch the 5s in class, because I love my 5s, and they're observing, and they don't want to kind of interrupt people's natural way of being. They genuinely are interested in how other people are relating to the environment and them. So they'll often hold back and observe another person, wondering what do they think of me? And the other person's thinking, this person doesn't like me, because they're not. But the 5 doesn't want to get in the way of the natural expression of the person that's sitting across from them. So they'll wait for them to show their true colors, and then they'll interact. But so there's a once removed kind of quality, or an observational quality that is very scientific in the approach. And
I think 5s love IFS because it's systemic. Right? It's complex, and they have the brains to really understand complex systems. And for many of them to actually touch into their emotions is very challenging. Come out of the mind.
Come out of the system.
come out of, yeah, exactly. Kind of come out, you know, and there's something I'm just thinking, part, right? That's such like a primary protector for so
sure.
many of us.
For sure.
So, and in fact, just in doing parts work with people, you're always building relationship with that part and helping people unblend from that part until it stops coming in.
Well, the
during
thinker
the
is something that we all value a tremendous amount in our culture for a really long time. So it's hard to kind of get out of that orientation.
Also, it's fun to see on our poll that everyone's pretty experienced with IFS that's on the call. So that makes sense. And so, yeah, critical, analytical, judging. Also, fives can have a very, what I call a prickly protective system. Like, you know, like disdain and disgust and so it's, you know, so if you're a practitioner and that stuff hooks you, it can be challenging to work with them. But if you can understand that, you know, that those parts are there and not get hooked by them, and then just build trust, right?
Yeah, so there's a lot of just pacing with a 5 client. And that's really nice to meet them where they are and explore their world with them. And it's a wonderful world.
It is, yeah.
It's a beautiful mind.
It's a big mind a lot of times too.
And, you know, people talk about the mind as being, you know, a problem, you know, that's like the whole thing is like, get out of your head. But, you know, because most of the expressions of the mind can be, you know, cartoon-like, complex and scary. But the highest level of the mind is consciousness. So being able to observe and to bring resources to yourself comes from the ability to use your mental faculties in a way that, you know, really blesses your system. So at the very top level, we have that consciousness, that Buddha consciousness, that Christ consciousness that's available to us.
And a lot of us have that connection to 5, you know, from a lot of different places on the Enneagram. And that's, we're going to touch on that briefly at the end, just a little bit around the connecting points. So type 6, I'm a type 6. I love these images.
You can see Everett's face and he kind of looks like...
Yeah, look at my image down in the corner, right? I could be right up there with
right up there.
I love it. I love it every once in a while. There's a kind of self-effacing humor that 6s have, and it's not on all the time for me. Usually, so if I'm in a group socially, it turns on, and it's good. Like it's good. Like
sometimes
I'm on,
right on there.
Yeah, I'm on, and I love it. And I love it when that shows up, and I really associate that now with my 6-iness. That kind of little self-effacing, but very, it's, you know what it is because the 6s, we track. We just notice everything. It's so funny because my partner's a 7, I'm a 6. So he's, from my perspective, kind of oblivious to the details of what's going on in our environment because he doesn't feel unsafe.
He's not looking at that.
Yeah, he's not looking at that. I'm tracking everything. Like if our food's late, I'll be sitting there fuming because I'm noticing that it's late, right? And he won't have any idea. And actually, when my partner Sam and I got together, it was shortly after that we were introduced to the Enneagram. And it was so, I think one of the things you gain from the Enneagram is this appreciation that, you know, that at least through this model, there are really 9 different, inherently different types of people. And that you can just you can appreciate who someone is for who they are and not feel they have to be like you. Yeah.
Right.
And that was key for me because I was confused.
Oh, me too.
I was confused by him. I was like, I don't get at all who this man is or how he works.
Right. And he should be like me.
And he should, yeah. And but then to see him as a type 7 and to start to see those qualities and then really to see him, well, and you're a 7 also, you know, And
yeah, you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater in terms of character. We're all amazing, and at times we all suck, and it's a whole package, right? So when we're looking at something and we're in a place where we only are observing the negative, what we perceive to be the negative aspects, it's really easy to kind of take something out of context. But it's just part of their whole orientation.
Well, and it's so interesting, the dynamic that as a 6, I'm so grounded, and I'm a very healthy 6, and so I am grounded. Like, that's the energy that flows through me, and that is like what he needs. Like, he needed that. My groundedness has like allowed him to land.
Oh yeah, my business partner. I'm a 7. My business partner is a 6. And she always says, "You're the vision and I'm the engine." And I said, "Oh, thank God." Because I really don't want to do that accounting stuff. And I really don't want to do that back end stuff. And I really don't want to look at the code in the website. I really don't. I really don't.
A 6 is, so there's something, what they say, phobic 6s and counterphobic 6s, and so there's a kind of 6 that's very afraid. There's just and both 6s have a low level of fear and anxiety that's like just always present. And many 6s are very negative. They can have a negative, they've got a fixation on what's not working in the world. And so they can have managers that are very hypervigilant. Their inner critics tend to be doubters and doubting. They can be caretaking in a different way. Caretaking that's coming out of fear.
Oh yeah.
Of like, oh, if I don't,
I got to make sure you're okay, so I could be okay.
Yeah. And also they're a mental type, so can be very analytical, very, brilliant. Wait, there's the humor.
Yeah, some of the 6s I know are the smartest people I know. Like they can have incredible IQs, the 5s and the 6s. Yeah, so.
Wow, and we are burning. It has been, I can't believe it's been almost 90 minutes. We're going to go longer, so I hope you hang in there with us.
We have, what, 4 minutes left?
No, we're going to go until we're done. Yeah. So hang in there with us, and if you can't finish with us live, come back. Because we're getting to the best
type next. No.
So yeah, exactly. And then there are the 7s. I love these images.
Oh my God.
All right.
This is another type that people just kind of idealize, but let me tell you, it's not all just sparkles.
A lot of partying, like unhealthy, like, in the, early 20s, right? 7s or something.
Oh my God.
A lot of partying.
Oh my God.
A lot of distraction. A lot of,
fun.
Life of the party.
Follow the sparkly thing. Lots of starts, but not like taking things through to fruition. But of course, like, can just, demonstrate random acts of incredible expertise with absolutely no training. It's pretty amazing how you can kind of just toss them in the middle of anything and they can figure it out. And look pretty fabulous doing it.
You're the improviser, right?
Yeah. So, of course, it's a wonderful thing to be able to improvise and to channel and to be able to move lots of material through. But the problem is that if you don't spend time with subject matter, and if you don't stay, then you don't get a sense of self-efficacy. So you're kind of always moving around feeling like, I don't really know how I know what I know. And that can create a kind of insecurity that makes you want to really move away from your pain and move away from thinking about any of that. So there can be a perpetual movement in the direction of what's next rather than of digesting the actual experience that they just had, which is enough and just right.
And their managers, charmer, fun-loving, narcissistic. I mean, this is something I learned with my partner. 7 tend to be self-oriented.
Yeah, it's all about me.
Yeah, and so their managers are set up that way, trying to, get them what they need.
Can easily direct all the room's attention to me. And then as a result of that, can sometimes then act out certain things that are going on in the group that need to be expressed and get scapegoated. So this is a pattern that happens with a lot of sevens, is that it's that coyote energy. So they somehow, what's needed is a distraction. So they light their tail on fire, and then they run over to the fountain to put it out, and they do a belly flop into the fountain, and it makes a huge splash, and everybody laughs, and then they do a dance. And it's just, but then everybody talks about them, and they think, how could they have done that? And then the seven has to go back home and like really kind of reconcile, like having just, you know, been both the most outstanding person in the party, but also the one that was the most criticized or the most, you know, insufficiently understood. Whoop. We went.
Did we go?
Yeah, we went back a few.
Sorry
There we go. That's okay. We might as well move to 8.
There we are at 8.
All right. I call the, should I say what I was said?
Sure.
Resting bitch face.
Oh.
4s can have resting bitch face.
8s, you mean?
I mean, 8s can have, oh, that was maybe a Freudian slip. 8s can have resting. You can see here that there's a seriousness. There's kind of this kind of no nonsense, don't fuck with me attitude that comes with type 8. And the leader, challenger, asserter, and boss, I think, are archetypes that are extremely shown in our popular TV shows and movies, especially ones about gangsters. And this really popularized right now is how to understand this strong but silent type.
Well, and we were, I mean, this is a whole other, this is an example of like how deep and rich the Enneagram could be. I mean, we were kind of in the age of the 8, like prior to, kind of we're in the age of the 3 now, right? But there was a time where that 8 energy actually was in power here.
Yeah.
You know, the oil barons and the, you know, it's like that kind of force is what created success here.
Oh, yeah, for sure. The emperor archetype. Yeah, so with the managers, we see, you know, this blunt, controlling, aggressive, not impressed manager part that can really come out and create the appearance of invulnerability, create the appearance of strength. And this is, of course, very important for an emperor. If you're an emperor and you have this huge dominion and all these people that count on you on creating the impression of being a strong union so that other factions don't attack you, it is extremely valuable to create the experience of being a powerful person when you're representing your tribe.
You know, and I can imagine too, just from an IFS perspective of, you know, if someone had a strong manager that was presenting invulnerability, normally I would think, well, there's a very vulnerable exile back there, right?
Which is usually the case.
Which is usually the case. But also I can feel here that that also might be an aspect of their essence.
Yeah.
You know, with an 8.
Yeah.
You know, with an 8, you know, you might unburden that protector and it would still be showing up in some way.
That's right.
Right.
That's right. Just what they would be feeling inside of that presentation would be different. They would be consciously choosing to create that image of being strong without having so much tension on the inside for themselves. So they can go back and forth from like having this really strong fortress on the outside, but feeling pretty innocent on the inside and childlike on the inside when you look at a healthy 8.
Well, and there's an aspect of self that can be very strong. You know, can be incredidly strong. Like if
there's
it needs
a large
to be.
S that's there.
Yeah.
At 8, again, you're grounding the whole universe and through and as your body, and that's your job. Is to say, you know what, this thing that we've been building, it fucking works. And it's going to continue to work. And it will work and work as long as it's needed, and then it will become something else. So this is like the final destination of the thing that we've been building. And it's gone through a lot of processes to get here. Now, once you're here, you're going to represent how well this thing is going to perform.
Have you had type 8 clients? I don't think I have.
Yeah.
Actually.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. What are some insights you have around working with them doing parts work?
You know, my experience working with 8s doing parts work is it for me as a 7, it took a while to have them trust me because of the sort of general orientation that I have towards being positive, and they were just like, whatever. You know, there was a lot of like resistance to that point of view, but the longer that I spent and became reliable to them, and really it was clear to them that I was like protecting them by the way that I was orienting my responses to them. And I made it very overt that my care was about making sure that they're safe in the world, and really feeling that, right? That they finally began to let me see what's going on behind the screen, because they knew that I was really on their side and I was on their team, that I wasn't going anywhere, and that I was going to keep showing up for them again and again and again, as long as they needed to feel safe. And so sometimes 8s will come in and out of my practice. So I'll see them over a long time, almost a decade, because they'll come in, they'll do a piece of work, it feels complete, they're done for that time, and then they'll go away for a year or two, and then they'll come back and we'll do another piece of work. And it's really rich to have like that long-term relationship with an 8 as kind of a consigliere. You know, they like to have advisement. So they like to be in the know, and they love to learn about other people's types. So they might also come in for a while from managing parts that, you know, really want help with how to lead at work with different personality types or what have you. So it may not
just
always
learning about the Enneagram itself,
it may not always be about doing the deep unburdening work at 8, and maybe for some other reason it's just as valuable.
All right, so now I'm just clicking over to chats and seeing that there were some technical issues, and looks like we've got about 20 people on the call so far. And I'm just curious, has anyone had any trouble actually seeing the slideshow? And if you do, just write something on the chat interface so we can see. And it's the first time we've used this particular interface, so I can't imagine it's possible that we didn't do something right. So here we are at type 8.
We went all the way around the circle.
We did. We went all the way around the circle. And what I wanted to do is actually, so we're just going to talk.
You can click back on the left.
Yeah, thanks.
There you go.
I'm going to go all the way up here.
Quick review.
Yeah, just going to talk about Enneagram.
It wants to pop out of that one for some reason.
Wow.
It's just there.
Yeah.
Okay. There it is.
There it is. So you're getting our full view here.
Okay.
So just chatting a little bit again, now we sort of touched on all the different types, and I think we gave a good overview of the Enneagram for if you've not, if you're not familiar with it. And so why don't you talk a little bit about type burdens and blessings?
Yeah, I think this is a little bit about how we're going to focus the workshop. Is when we go through each type, we're really going to look at how that character type as a storyline, archetypally, as an energy in and of itself, has its very own burdens and blessings. So these are the gifts and the challenges that get like sort of born in when you're a particular type. So when you pass through the chute and you get incarnated as a particular type with connecting points, there is going to be specific journey that you're going to have to go through as the hero or heroine on that ride. So we're going to study each type and look at the hero's journey for each of these points of view. And that's just very, very specific to Enneagram burden, because a lot of the burdens that we work with from an IFS perspective tend to point back to family of origin burdens. So this is going to be very different, because some of those, if you're a therapist, is that it isn't a clear tie back to the family of origin. So there isn't a story around why this fear got developed per se.
Mm-hmm.
It's just inherent or existential in the type. And so there's also wonderful blessings that we can see that are just inherent. And it's really excellent to be able to see how to maximize those and how to unburden some of these type burdens and how we might do that. Are we looking at your face? There we go.
All right, so we got this. Sorry, it looks like the slide went away there for a few minutes.
Okay. Enneagram parts is your particular type, which is like your dominant lens or perspective. So this is the radio station that you're tuned into the loudest, is your primary type. But then you have your connecting points, which you saw in the diagram were specific for each type. Either you're on the primary triangle or the hexad. And so you have two particular other types that are rotating around in the orbit of your psyche that we call Ennea parts. So you'll get to know these parts with an attention to detail. And it's fascinating to separate them out and to see that there's a whole series of motivations that come from these Ennea parts, and that they work together within your inner system to create harmony so that we can do life on Earth together.
Well, and like as an example of that, being a 6, right? So in what they say called disintegration, when I'm under stress, I move to type 3. So I have this type 3, I guess it's really a firefighter, right? That gets really achievement oriented, gets really focused and really productive. Mm-hmm. And you know, in my early days when I was really run a lot by my stress, the only way I could get things done was to be in crisis. Mm-hmm. So the way I had evolved this whole way of being in the world where I would have to let things evolve to the point of crisis before I'd actually have the motivation to focus on them. Mm-hmm. And so that's my connecting point to 3. And then another great love of mine is inner peace and meditation. And when I'm not in stress, but really moving into, you know, really being in a wonderful, secure place, then I go to 9, you know, and I go into peace and oneness, and I just love oneness.
Yeah, and it's fun to have a look at it and see, like, oh, my connecting points, are they more firefighters? Are they more exiles mm-hmm. for me? Does it feel like a manager? Mm-hmm. And you'll see those distinctions, and they do evolve.
Yeah, my partner's a 7. When he gets stressed, he goes to 1. Mm-hmm. So he suddenly becomes an angry perfectionist and gets shit done.
Yeah.
Like that's like...
Maybe a manager.
Uh-huh.
Is one's a manager. So I think, you know, again, diversity is another buzzword that's been around for a while. But when we're in diversity, it's actually really challenging to interact with other people. So the Enneagram will really, and studying the Enneagram and IFS together will really help you to appreciate these differences and be able to navigate them with more skill and finesse. For sure. So that's one of the main benefits, I think, of really studying these different types, is being able to join with them and appreciate what they're bringing and make space for people to bring what they're good at.
Yeah, because there's such a focus in IFS of having that, of something we call self-leadership, you know, really leading life from our calm, clear center. And from that place, we really do appreciate differences. You know, so to have something that could allow you to just another way of understanding that, like, oh, that's just the way that part is, right. Or that's the way that person is. Right. You know, I don't have to judge them.
If that didn't exist in the world, we would be in trouble. Mm-hmm. That the difference brings a blessing. I think that's very mm-hmm. clear. But we'll also look at complementarity, the way parts work together, and the way that parts work in the universe, inside the way they work together, and outside in the world, the way parts work together.
Yeah.
And complement one another. And the most wonderful thing I think about the Enneagram is to look at that your primary motivation that's expressed through your character type can easily point you towards your life path, your dharma, because the things that you're good at and the things that you're passionate about are the biggest blessings in the world.
Yep.
So it becomes really clear and helps people kind of discover what their sacred livelihood might be.
And again, that's something that really complements IFS, right? Because if you're using IFS to do, you know, all of us that use this, even if we're healing others, use it on ourselves, because you have to use IFS on yourself in order to practice it. You know, as you get healthier, right? As you unburden more of your exiles, as you, you know, then at a certain point, your dharma, your life path does start to show up. You know, as you're no longer driven by the external burdens that you've taken on, you know, then that unique brightness within you and the Enneagram really can help illuminate that.
Oh, absolutely. That's a kind of a profound outcome from studying the Enneagram.
And
this and more.
So yeah, so what we're going to do in the course, it's our plan is to start it next week. Is, you know, basically we'll be spending 90 minutes to 2 hours every week on a specific type, and just going into a lot more detail. And as you can see, we can talk. I cannot believe how fast that first 20 minutes. I looked, I was like, we've been doing this for 20 minutes. So
we hope you felt the same way. Thank you for listening.
Yeah, thank you so much for listening. And we're gonna attach to this video, we're gonna send this link out to everyone who quite a few people signed up to watch it. So we'll send out information about the training, and also some information about some offers of ways of working with Dina or myself. If you're not sure about your type or like to get more a deeper insight, you could work with Dina and get an Enneagram type consultation. Either of us could work with you around doing some IFS work that's related to your type. And then of course we'll send out information on the 9-week training also. So thank you for listening.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks for being that part of the 1% of the world that actually is doing their work. that's self-reflective.
Yeah.
And so this is really something both Dina and I have a passion about. So it was a lot of fun to just get together and talk.
And it's tonight the supermoon?
Oh, is it?
Is that tonight or tomorrow night?
I don't know.
Anyway, we're right in that striking month. So there might be a full moon out when we go outside from our presentation here in Everett's office. And we hope you enjoy it.
All right. Thanks,
everyone. Have a wonderful
everyone.
evening. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.